Okay, picture this. You're dropped into an absolute frozen wasteland. I'm talking temperatures plummeting way below zero, the wind is just howling relentlessly, and your only shelter, just the snow beneath your feet. Everything is wrong, nothing's going right! Those were the panicked words literally echoing across the freezing landscape on just the second day of what was supposed to be a straightforward survival challenge. Today, we're looking at a story of pure, freezing chaos where one tiny mistake means hypothermia, frostbite, or, even worse.
So, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to break down Jimmy and his 5 friends' grueling quest for survival, and really, redemption, in literally the most unforgiving environment on Earth. After a previous survival failure, they set out to prove they could conquer the Arctic. But as you'll see, the Arctic, it definitely plays by its own rules.
Part 1. Stranded in the Arctic, the elements and the rules. So here's the setup. The crew was dropped right into the middle of the Arctic for 7 long days, completely without tents. Their immediate, literally life-or-death priority was step 1, creating a snow shelter before the sun went down. Out here, failing to get out of the wind on night 1 meant freezing to exposure. Digging a cave out of that hard, icy snow wasn't just for comfort, it was absolutely crucial. It was their only way to share body heat and survive those plummeting overnight temperatures.
But man, reality set in fast. They expected a tough but kind of manageable challenge, right? With a daily rescue option if things went sideways. Instead, by day 2, they were packed like sardines in this tiny snow cave, getting literally the worst sleep of their lives. And while trying to get warm, Jimmy actually set his pants on fire. No joke. And to make the whole shebang worse, a massive blizzard rolled in, completely grounding the rescue pilot. So, yeah, evacuation, no longer an option. Part 2. The fight for shelter, battling frostbite.
So that initial shelter simply failed to keep out the extreme cold. And to put this into perspective, in these temperatures, 10 minutes is all it takes for wind exposure to cause a limb to freeze solid. Which brings us to a terrifying moment of rapid physical deterioration for the team. Chandler, one of the guys, completely lost feeling in his feet. When he took his boots off, his toes had turned totally white, like zero color left in them at all. It was a severe frostnip scare that threatened to end his challenge right on the spot.
So what do? How do you fix freezing toes when you have no heaters and your firewood is just soaking wet from a blizzard? Well, you've got to use body heat. In a desperate, pretty bizarre, but incredibly effective maneuver, Chandler's freezing foot was shoved directly into their cameraman Darius's bare armpit. I know it sounds totally crazy, but this rapid transfer of body heat restored his blood flow and effectively saved his foot from permanent frostbite.
Part 3. Frostbite and failed hunts, the lowest point.
By days 3 and 4, the need for warmth was totally eclipsed by a desperate need for calories. Things were going downhill and fast. On day 3, an attempt to ice fish completely failed when their auger bottomed out against solid ice over 2.5 feet thick. And by day 4, the weather worsened, their clothes were soaking wet, and they were entirely out of food. Morale was at absolute rock bottom. Plunging morale, shivering bodies, and soaking wet gear pushed this team right to the absolute brink. They were risking severe hypothermia at this point. But Jimmy had this intense resolve. I'm not failing again. Having failed a previous survival challenge, he flat out refused to give up, and it was this fierce determination that forced the team into a highly risky new plan. Part 4. The Desperate River Trek, a do-or-die decision. Knowing they were literally going to starve at camp, they made a do-or-die decision on day 5. They had to find a moving river where the ice was thinner. Because, well, science dictates that moving, churning water causes the ice sheet above it to be much thinner than the stagnant water of a lake. But actually getting there? A total nightmare. First, they used a drone to spot a river bending way off in the distance. Then they had to trek across a frozen lake on cross-country skis, which honestly just resulted in constant, exhausting falls. They had to swap to snowshoes to navigate this dense, deep snow forest, all while tiptoeing around massive, super fresh tracks left by a wild moose. This grueling 3-hour trek through deep snow drained their absolute last remaining calories. They were running entirely on fumes. Part 5. Catching the lifeline, the ice fishing climax. But they made it. They finally reached the river, drilled down, and found an absolute miracle. The ice was only 8 inches thick. But what followed was a grueling test of endurance. 7. That's the number of agonizing hours Jimmy and the crew sat completely still on the freezing ice, just waiting for a single bite. They knew for a fact that returning to camp empty-handed meant absolute failure. If they didn't catch a fish, the whole team was going to shoot the rescue flare the very next morning and quit. Hours passed. Jimmy was literally in the middle of this defeated monologue, talking to the camera about how freezing cold he was and how he just didn't want to fail, when suddenly, bam, the line yanked. A massive adrenaline rush hit the ice as a fish finally took the bait. But man, that triumph instantly turned to absolute disaster. As the fish reached the top of the ice hole, Jimmy made a critical error. Having never done this before, he tried to barehand the slippery fish right out of the icy water. And it slipped right from his grasp and splashed back down the hole. The crushing, immediate despair that followed was just palpable. I mean, they had sat in the freezing wind for 7 hours, only to drop their one single chance at survival right back into the river. But hey, out here where there's one fish, there's usually more. Refusing to give up, they kept their lines in the water and orchestrated this rapid-fire comeback. Within moments, they hooked another fish, and this time, they pulled it out smoothly. And immediately after that, they caught a second one. Redemption was theirs, and they finally had food. Part 6. Victory on the Ice. The final celebration. Returning to camp as heroes, the turnaround was massive. Just think about it. Just hours prior, morale was completely broken, and they had exactly one beef stick left to share among 6 hungry men in a freezing shelter. And now, they were feasting on hot, fire-cooked Arctic fish, sleeping warmly on fresh spruce bedding inside a newly expanded snow cave. They literally moved from the absolute brink of failure to a genuine survival success story. And the ultimate victory came on day 6. When that bright yellow rescue plane finally returned and buzzed right over their camp, you know the temptation to leave was there. They held the flare gun right in their hands. But because they had pushed through the hardest moments, secured their shelter, and caught their own food, they confidently chose to just put the flare gun down. They stayed, finished the challenge, and absolutely conquered the Arctic.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. We've seen how insanely quickly things can go wrong out there, from freezing limbs to vanishing food. So I have to ask you, facing a massive blizzard with no tents, no food, and literally only the clothes on your back, could you survive 7 days in the Arctic?